It's lunch break at Darul Uloom Haqqaniya, Pakistan's oldest and best-known Islamic religious seminary, or madrasa. It's been preaching a hard-line interpretation of Islam since 1947. We wonder if the students are familiar with Western music. Do you know any of the Western musicians, we ask?
No.
If anyone listens to music, he explains, it's a sin. But what happens if he gets into a bus where music is being played? I tell the driver that music isn't good. He explains that it's un-Islamic. If he doesn't listen to me, I recite the Quran and try to concentrate on my work. But he says Facebook is allowed. Then he has to go. Lessons are starting again. "3,500 pupils from Pakistan and Afghanistan study at Haqqaniya. Some stay only a year or two. Others complete all their religious education here and later open their own mosques or madrasas. Younger pupils are taught in the building next door. Zaid Ullah is learning English so he can spread Islam to the entire world. Of course, Islam should rule everywhere, he says. The whole world has to become Muslim. The Islamic justice system has to apply all over the world. Many pupils come from families that are so poor that the Quranic school is their only hope of education. Here they get free room and board and medical care. And the philosophy of Sami ul Haq. He's run the Haqqaniya for about 30 years. Senior Taliban leaders attended the seminary. The famous commander Mullah Omar studied here. Osama bin Laden is also known to Haq. They were all heroes, of course, he says. If someone attacks your country, you have to defend it, whether you're a Muslim or not. Sami ul Haq tells us that in the past, jihadists in Afghanistan and the seminary received billions of dollars in support from the CIA, back when the Soviet Union was the enemy. Many students went to fight. He says they all volunteered, and that he sent no one out to wage jihad. The West never gave the Taliban a chance to implement their system properly, he says. But although they had to wage war against the West, they were able to make peace in their own country, and there wasn't even a single police station. Despite that, criminals weren't tolerated, and when Sharia law was introduced, blood feuds came to an end. Nobody even dared to look at a woman. Today his graduates become not just imams and teachers, but also politicians and car mechanics. They're all meant to spread Islam. It's their duty to preach Islam to the whole world, he says. More than that, it's their mission. After our talk, Sami ul Haq invites us to eat with his sons. But in Pakistan, the school also has its opponents. Here in the capital, Islamabad, authorities have had their eye on the Taliban for a few years, though the government didn't promise strict monitoring of religious schools until just a few months ago, after extremists stormed a military-run school last December, killing more than 100 children. The Education Ministry is responsible for regulation. Here, all the larger Quran schools have to be registered and monitored. That's 35,000 madrasas in all. No wonder files have been piling up in the minister's office. At least until Mohammed Balig or Rahman appears for an interview.
That's all right. I can keep doing things while we the exact percentage wouldn't be known, but my guess would be that it has to be less than or 1% or 0.5% of the madrasas now.
He's referring to extremist madrasas that would be closed immediately. But what about schools such as Haqqaniya, which don't train their pupils in weaponry, but do consider Osama bin Laden a hero?
That could be personal freedom of speech or expression for anyone, could be, but for closing down a madrasa, any arms training, any militancy training can be a basis, or if anyone is being taught to kill or inculcating such practices which would encourage people or students or young people of the country to take part in any extremist activity. So if an institute is found doing any such thing, that institute would be closed down. Yes.
Does he believe that Haqqaniya still has links to its former students, the Taliban?
Usually from the US. I have to make a general statement, and I have to ensure that no one, I repeat, no one should have any exclusions, or no one should be spared for that purpose.
He has no further comment on Haqqaniya. He says he'd prefer it if all Pakistani pupils were educated in state schools, but that Pakistan, which spends just 2% of its budget on education, lacks the money. The next day we drive to Rawalpindi. The city, with a population of millions, is just a few kilometers from Islamabad. We visit a small madrasa in a poor district of the city. Idris Haqqaniya founded it in the mid-1990s. Now he runs 15 schools just like it. The school director studied at Darul Ulum Haqqaniya in the 1980s. Many of his fellow students went to fight in Afghanistan back then. I wanted to fight, he says, but I simply didn't have any time because I was so busy with my studies. He too considers Osama bin Laden and Mullah Omar heroes. Back then, he explains, no one wanted to fight against the Russian tyrants in Afghanistan except those two men. Bin Laden had lived in palaces and studied in Europe, but he gave up everything to help the oppressed people in Afghanistan. He sacrificed himself for them, and that's why they're heroes in the Muslim world. But they're also heroes the world over, because they fought for all oppressed people. That's why they're heroes. As for the September 11th attacks, his response is full of anti-Semitic propaganda. It's all lies, he says. To this day, America has produced no evidence at all that Osama bin Laden was involved in the attacks. I believe the Jews are behind them. Look, thousands of Jews worked in the Twin Towers, but on that day, bizarrely, none of them were there. Islam forbids us to kill innocent people. That's why Osama bin Laden can't have been involved at all. Theories like this are widespread in Pakistan, but far fewer support the Taliban system. We'll continue to fight and teach, he says, to introduce Sharia law. Then he politely asks us to leave as evening prayers are about to begin. At his alma mater, Haqqaniya, Sami ul Haq is already teaching the next generation of students so that they too will spread his brand of Islam to the world. A world in which no music will be played in buses, women will wear burqas, and Osama bin Laden is a hero.